We take a look at the Dallas Stars, their offseason moves, and their quest to get to the Stanley Cup final on this offseason edition of Locked On NHL GameNight.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL GameNight. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before. Only on Locked On NHL GameNight. Your team every day.
Hey, hockey fans, welcome to Locked On NHL GameNight, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thanks for making Locked On NHL GameNight your place to get a recap of the night in the NHL during the regular season and the playoffs. We are available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. This episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Eddie Garcia, an LA Kings fan on the West Coast. He is Shukri Wrights, a Boston Bruins fan on the East Coast. And together we are normally discussing all the goals, saves, big moments, and stories from the night in the NHL. But this is the offseason. There are no games to recap, but we're here to help you get ready for next season by previewing all 32 NHL teams between now and opening night. And before we bring in our next local expert, Shu, today we're going to learn more about the Dallas Stars.
Everything is bigger in the state of Texas. So in this episode, it's only right that we're going to talk about the Dallas Stars and a season that has been remarkable, but yet not so spectacular in terms of how it ended. Yet next season, there is still Texas-sized expectations for a Stanley Cup. And I can't wait to talk to Joey Erickson all about it coming up now.
Well, let's waste no more time, and we bring in the host of Locked On Dallas Stars. He is Joey Erickson, going to give us his insight on the team he covers every day, and he's also the voice of the Corpus Christi Ice Rays and the NAHL as well. Joey, thanks for doing this. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I appreciate you boys having me on. It's been a fun off season. It's been blistering hot down here in the Lone Star State, but we're a couple of months away from hockey season rolling around, which is good news.
Well, before we get into the offseason moves, do want to touch on last season. Stars make the conference finals for a third year in a row. That's the good news. The bad news is they once again fall short, losing to the Edmonton Oilers this time around in 5 games. From the expectations going into last season to where you ended up, what's the ultimate feel of how the Dallas Stars performed last season?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it was a bust in some ways, just because it was cup or bust going into the season. The Stars had a loaded roster, and post-trade deadline, they even had a more stacked roster after acquiring Mikko Rantanen at the deadline. And because of the injury to Miro Heiskanen, they were able to manipulate the cap a little bit. So they had a loaded roster, and there was no possible way the Stars were going to go into this upcoming season with a better roster than they had at the end of the Western Conference Final because of the opportunity to manipulate the cap the way they did. And once again, they're just looking for answers on how to defeat an Edmonton Oilers team that just gave them fits for the second straight season, and just trying to get over the Western Conference final hump. For whatever reason, Pete DeBoer seemed to have all the answers through the regular season and in the first 2 rounds, out-coaching Connor Hellebuck, out-coaching one of the best teams in the Western Conference this past year in the Winnipeg Jets. But for whatever reason, he seems to have a shelf life, and you get into the nitty-gritty when you have to be physical and just tough it out and play that rough and tough style of game. And just for whatever reason, his teams are unable to do that. And the offense, number one, is really lethargic when it gets to that point of the season. They just cannot find a way to beat a goaltender and not test, a goaltender like Stuart Skinner enough. So it's a disappointing year. It's awesome. And it's frankly crazy that Pete DeBoer is gone, because it's one of the best 3-season stretches in Dallas Stars history. It's the second best winning percentage, only behind Ken Hitchcock, who won a Stanley Cup in 1999. He's in that company of Dallas Stars head coaches. I think clearly he's like the second best, maybe third best coach in Dallas Stars history, and he's gone now because he just fails to get it done at some of the bigger moments. And after what transpired with Jake Ottinger, your franchise goaltender, some of the comments he made threw him under the bus after that Game 5 loss against Edmonton, sort of ran the truck over him and then backed over a few more times. And let's face it, you can't take shots at your number one goaltender, especially a goaltender that just took an 8-year extension earlier in the season. Like, he's going to be around. He's going to be your number one guy. And it felt like he lost the room a little bit. So now it's this whole new era the Stars are going into. And I know this is a long-winded answer, but there was a lot to kind of break down after that Western Conference final. It's been a bit of an active, offseason for Dallas, and something I don't think the front office and general manager Jim Nill wanted to have happen, but they felt it was necessary to make a move.
You kind of answered my question unintentionally. That's how good and in-depth your answer was, because what I was going to ask you, and maybe you can elaborate on this a little bit more, because on a national perspective, when the Western Conference Finals ended and everything went down between the former head coach Peter DeBoer and the number one goaltender Jake Ottinger, my thought process was there has got to be a pretty palpable amount of anger, not just between the head coach and the goaltender, but in terms of the locker room. You talk about the frustration with Jamie Benn, the frustration with the expectations, most notably Mikko Rantanen, who was red hot through the first two rounds, but cooled out dramatically. So, Joey, my question to you is, can you take us a little bit behind the curtain in terms of the going into detail in terms of the frustration and the anger within the organization, not just in terms of Peter DeBoer getting fired, but in terms of the thought process behind Jim Nill and the decision not to go through an overhaul of this roster that's still capable of winning the cup?
Exactly. I think you made a couple great points there. Jim Nill, mentioned in his postseason press conference that they went through a process of each and every player kind of coming in and giving their thoughts on the season. And he didn't have to really say it, but it became quite clear. I think there was a lack of trust between the players and head coach Pete DeBoer. And it was reported that there was players in the locker room, they were not happy with Jake being pulled early like they did in Game 5 after giving up a couple of goals. And if you recall, one was a breakaway and one was Corey Perry point blank in front of the net. Not a whole lot you can say about Jake Ottinger on those two, although you would like to make a save there, but you can say that about every shot a goaltender takes. And I think there was that relationship and maybe trust that DeBoer had maybe created over the first couple seasons. Like, I think if it wasn't for the Ottinger situation, I mean, even right after Game 5, I think Pete DeBoer's job is safe. Like, he was going to be the next head coach. And then he made the comments about Ottinger. And it's like, I don't think the front office, your Jim Nill, you can't just take that lightly. And after he went through the one-on-ones with each player, I think it just became pretty clear that they have to make a change. And Jim Nill, over the last 3 seasons, has won the GM of the year in the NHL. And he's sitting there probably thinking, what the heck? I have nothing to really show for it. I have this great roster I've given Pete DeBoer. I've done a fantastic job of surrounding the Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin in their twilight years with all this great young talent. And we're being told how great we are. And we keep getting back to these big moments in the Western Conference Final. And I keep winning these awards, but I have one thing left missing, and that's the Stanley Cup at the end of the day. And I think that's why they probably went with the decision, okay, we don't need to overhaul this roster. We can bring back a Matt Duchene. We can bring back a Jamie Benn on a 1-year deal. We can keep basically the core around. Maybe it's just a different year, a different perspective that I'm hoping Glenn Gulletson can bring to the Stars. And I'm pretty bullish on what he can bring to Dallas in round 2, because it's going to be a real different circumstance and situation than the first go around back in the early 2010s.
We're just scratching the surface with Joey Erickson. Going to talk much more about the new head coach who we just touched on a minute ago for the Dallas Stars, the future of Jason Robertson. Lots still to get into right here on Locked On NHL Game Night. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or the high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in the game while your friends are out getting sunburned. FanDuel tracks your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It is easy to use. fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether it's a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're a part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are continuing with Joey Erickson. He is the host of Locked On Dallas Stars. I want to talk about, obviously, some of the offseason moves. And you mentioned his name. Glenn Gulutzan is back for his second go-round as head coach of the Dallas Stars, a guy I actually have a bit of a connection with. I was calling games for the Fresno Falcons back in the day when he wrapped up his playing career with the Falcons and started his assistant coaching career there. So I was there to witness the end of his playing career and the start of his coaching career. We won't talk about how long ago that was, actually, but he did coach the Stars for 2 years. The team did not make the playoffs either of those years. He then goes to Calgary for 2 seasons, made the playoffs once, didn't win a playoff game, so he's still looking for his first playoff win as a head coach. Obviously, Joey, you know all too well that the Stars are looking to make it to that next level of the playoffs, but you mentioned it just a little bit, that you were bullish on Glenn Gulutzan. Why are you convinced that this time around he is the answer for the Stars?
Well, I know you can't take a lot out of introductory press conferences just because it seems like every new head coach, it goes well. It's kind of hard to really botch those, but he said all the right things. And I took away from it that he was going to be really collaborative. This was going to be an opportunity for him to maybe right some of the wrongs he did earlier in his career. And doing a bit of a deeper dive on him, I took a look at some articles from The Athletic that went into some of his career with Edmonton and how he really revamped that power play, because before he got there, the Edmonton Oilers power play was one of the worst power plays in the entire NHL. And that was with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And then once he got there a couple years in, now it became one of the biggest threats that all our teams get to face. And, you know, it's kind of butt clenching time when the Oilers get on the power play. And the Stars know all too well about that over the last few seasons. And he mentioned the mistakes that he made his first go around in Dallas. And he learned that every system in hockey has won a Stanley Cup, and it's about tailoring that system to the personnel. And he mentioned how he's going to be collaborative with his new assistant coach, Neil Graham, who was with the Texas Stars and was a bit of a popular pick, I would say, here in Dallas to hopefully get the job here with the Stars. But they were going to keep him within the organization as assistant coach, and Alain Nasreddine, who went back with Pete DeBoer over the last couple of years. But Pete DeBoer he kind of had a way about him where, like, we're going to run my systems. And it seems like Glenn is going in with an open mind, like, I'm going to have my hands on some stuff, but it's not my job to be hovering over Alain Nasreddine or Neil Graham. I'm sure he's going to have a little taste in what he wants to see out of the power play, but I think it's going to be a real collaborative process, and he learned from his first go-around in some of his other spots. And I think you can throw out the first go-around with Dallas, too. Stars were in bankruptcy. Wasn't a great team. They were going through a lot of turmoil during that time when I was a young hockey fan. This is no shot at Joey Erickson, but he was the leading scorer for the Stars that year. And Joey Erickson is one of my favorite players all time growing up. He really
former
is.
Bruin.
Former Bruin. Traded him for Tyler Seguin, of course. We have similar namesake. I know it's spelled differently, but I love Joey Erickson growing up. But he led the Stars in points that year. And I think it's safe to say that roster wasn't very good for Glenn Gulutzan this go around. And he also said, and this is sort of what Pete DeBoer had to go through a couple of years ago when he took over, like, he's being handed a very good roster. This isn't a team that's rebuilding. Like, you just don't F it up, so to speak. like you're being handed the cars of a Mercedes. Like, it's just trying to kind of keep it back on track and see where you can make some improvements. And he really talked about bumping up the physicality a bit. That was something that he seemed to make a statement about. Like, this is something that he noticed on the bench when he was with the Oilers over the past couple of years. If they can kind of bump up the intensity of the physicality, maybe that's a way they can kind of get over the hump. It's going to be fascinating what he can bring. And I'm excited to see Glenn Gulletson 2.0. It wasn't a sexy pick, right? But I don't think there was a ton of options that the Stars really had after they got rid of Pete DeBoer. And that's also something you have to risk if you're Jim Nill. Like, there wasn't like a slam dunk opportunity to go out and get this, proven head coach. So there's going to be some new blood, and it's now time for Glenn to prove it, right? Like, he's been with the Oilers over the last 8 years, proved he can be a head coach, and maybe it's this time around in Dallas.
There's something that you touched on that really like perked up my ear, so to speak, in which you talked about how the new head coach, or should I say returning head coach, Glenn Gulletson, one of the things that he touched on is that he wants to increase the physicality of the Dallas Stars, because it's something that I have noticed is that the deeper that they go in the playoffs, whether if it's against Edmonton or if it's against Vegas, the physicality dips off. And on top of that, the health of their back end has been it was an issue last spring, most notably with Miro Heiskanen not being healthy. So my question to you is, how do you foresee Glenn Gulletson increasing the physicality of this Dallas Stars team, and all the while ensuring that the back end and at least the team as a whole can stay healthy, especially for when the games matter most?
Yeah, they're going to have to change the way that they play to some degree. Under DeBoer, they were a really good defensive team. Let's not beat around the bush. Over the last 3 years under DeBoer, they were top 5 pretty much every season in goals against and goals for. And then all of a sudden, the goals start to dry up, and some of that is their philosophy, where they like to play off the rush. One of the best rush teams over the past couple of years. They score a lot of goals that way. But we all know once you get to playoff hockey, the rink shrinks a bit, and it becomes harder to score off the rush. And it becomes harder just to score goals in general. And they just didn't have that ability to adapt. He mentioned too, Glenn Gulletson, that he's going to change the way their forecheck. So I'm really intrigued to see what that means and kind of see how that plays out. And the injuries have played a role. I would say it's the depth defensively that has probably been more of a killer than health. Although you never want to have your number one defenseman out and missing games like Miro Heiskanen did. And that's what made it even more impressive. The Stars kind of got through the first 2 rounds with a less than ideal Miro Heiskanen. But they didn't really have that depth that they were looking for when you're kind of trotting out Lyubushkin, Matt Dumba. You're just trotting out kind of guys, and you don't have players. And when you run into teams like Edmonton and Vegas, number 1, who are just so big and brawny physically on the back end. Like, you just look at the Panthers and the Oilers, like, you just look at their back ends. And I know the modern NHL is a bit different now, but you look at that, like, they're 6'3", they're 220, like, they're just big, brawny guys, and Stars just don't really have that. So it's going to be fascinating to see how he wants to turn up the physicality. It also doesn't help when you're trailing. The Stars trailed, I think, 15 out of the 16 games, or 15 out of the 18 they played this past postseason. It's all nice and dandy to say, hey, let's be physical. But if you're trailing by 2, you can't just run around with your head cut off and hitting guys. You have to get the puck. You're trying to score. When you get up and you get out to leads, then you can play more physical and start to bruise your opponents. So he mentioned too, having them ready in the regular season, bumping up that physicality. So I think there's going to be a bit of a style change offensively for Dallas, where maybe it's not so much just off the rush. Maybe there's a little more dump and chase and trying to bruise, blue lines. And that's a way you can take some off of your back end too. We all know sometimes the best defense is just playing offense. If you're 200 feet away from your own net, that can take a lot of minutes off of guys like Heiskanen and Harley that have had to carry a ton of the minutes over the past few seasons.
So the Stars re-signed Matt Duchene, team-friendly deal. You're paying him $4.5 million for your leading scorer. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Jamie Benn, you mentioned, comes back 1 year, $1 million. A lot of incentives there as well. You do trade away Mason Marchment and Matt Dumba. When it's all kind of said and done, how do you characterize the offseason for the Stars?
Yeah, I would say there were some necessary moves like Matt Dumba. They needed to offload that contract. And really the Stars were handcuffed this offseason because of the two moves they made a year ago with signing Matt Dumba and Lyubushkin to a combined $7 million. Those deals were just not worth it the minute they put into that contract. In a world now where we talk about the cap all the time and how it constricts these teams, those are just the type of moves that can put you behind the eight ball a bit. And it's not like the Stars are having to completely retool their roster. Marchment, again, I love Marchment, would have loved to have him here, but he became a cap casualty because the Stars had to open up some space. And bringing back Dutchy is great. Again, he was a point per game player at his age, is fantastic. We would like to see the production in the postseason. However, he's somebody that has really struggled the past 2 years. Coming in and trying to produce. It's just, I think it's been an off season of just kind of retooling here and there, but for the most part, kind of running back what they've had over the past couple seasons, and maybe the change in philosophy, a change in a head coach can get them over the hump. But again, the Stars are going to have to be active at the deadline if they want to make a real push. They're going to need a top 4 defenseman, right? They're going to need somebody that can chew up some minutes. And who knows, maybe Jason Robertson, who I'm sure we're going to get to, can be a pretty juicy trade bait, depending on how the year's going. I'm not advocating for him to be traded, but I'm sure he could bring back some good potential right shot defenseman at some point.
All right, we're going to look at the Dallas Stars projected lineup and get the final thoughts with Joey Erickson, the host of Locked On Dallas Stars. We'll do that next here on Locked On NHL Game Night. We are wrapping it up with Joey Erickson. He is the host of Locked On Dallas Stars. And Joey, I'm going to throw up a graphic here for the people watching on YouTube. For those who are listening on the podcast, I will read it out. And please feel free to correct me if I get anything wrong, because we're here to learn about the Dallas Stars. If I say a name wrong, you can go ahead and correct me. But we're going to look at this projected lineup, and you can tell me what looks right or what could change by the time we get to opening night face-off. So you've got a top line, which is very good, of Rope Hentz, Jason Robertson, and Mikko Rantanen. Second line of Duchesne, Sagan, and Ben. Johnston centering a third line of Back and Bork. Faksa on the fourth line with Steele and Blackwell. Your defensive pairings, Lindell and Heiskanen, Harley and Lyubushkin, and Bischel and Lundqvist, and a tandem in net of Ottinger and DeSmith. Does that look about right to you, or are there any positions that are kind of up for grabs here in training camp?
Yeah, there's a couple situations that could occur where I think you would see some of these trios be mixed up. For the pairings on the blue line, I would say that's pretty much going to be standard for Dallas going into the season, unless Harley and Heiskanen get paired up again. They would like to separate them so Miro can play on his strong side. Miro hasn't really played on his strong side since he joined the NHL in 2019. He's always been on his weak side, but he's such an excellent defender. It really hasn't mattered, but they tried it last year with Matt Dumba. That experiment didn't go very well. So I'm really curious to see if they keep Lindell and Heiskanen together. That way they can kind of get the combination of right shot, left shot. Otherwise, they may go back to Harley Heiskanen. But up front, where some things could change, I'm fascinated by the top line because, yes, on paper it looks fantastic, but they really never got going at the end of the regular season. Post-trade deadline, once Rantanen came over, we saw a lot of Hentz and Robertson, and they had some moments, of course, but it never seemed like it quite gelled, and maybe just because they're trying to do it on the fly. That can always be tough, getting a new guy integrated and trying to find a rhythm. Also, Robertson and Hentz, really since Pavelski have left, haven't found that perfect complement to each other. So maybe Golitson's going to allow Rantanen and Hentz, Robertson to kind of work out the kinks. But what I'm fascinated by is really Wyatt Johnston or Maverick Bourque, where you ask the question, where is there maybe some spots that can be won? Maverick Bourque is on my radar as a potential guy that can maybe have a breakout year and really make Dallas think about making him their third line center, because they could potentially move Wyatt Johnston up to the wing, put him on the left wing with Robertson, or put him on the left wing, with Hentz and Rantanen. That would drop Robertson down, and then you can move Bourque to your third line center. There's a wing in here that's going to have to play center. It could be Sam Steele, but it could be Maverick Bourque. I think the expectations were a bit high going into last year just because Bork was the AHL MVP. He lit up the American Hockey League with the Texas Stars. But every year, every new place he goes to, you can look back sort of in his career. It kind of takes a year to get himself, I guess, acquainted with a new league. And I think we saw that last year. And I think if he can play really well, make himself a third line center for Dallas, you feel pretty strong down the middle. And then you can move Johnson up to that top six, and you can really have a sort of loaded up top six with a Johnston, Hintz, Rantanen. And then you look at Duchesne, Sagan, Robertson. That could be really intriguing. But it's that left side, the left wing. You look at Robertson, Ben, Beck, Steele. There's a lot to be desired there, especially after Marchment is gone, after Evgeny Dodonov as well. Those are two departures that scored 20-plus goals for you last season. Ben has been declining. What is his role going to look like? In the postseason, Ben was playing about 12 minutes a night, and he was a fourth-line checker. That's not what we're used to in Dallas. We're used to that kind of powered forward that can give you, 60 to 80 points a year. His offensive production is slowly declining. So what is his role going to look like? Steele, again, that's a candidate that could possibly be bumped up. So there's going to be opportunities for some of these guys in the bottom six that can maybe play their way up into the top six, get some better opportunities. But overall, it's a pretty darn good roster when you look at it, and you have to factor in, like, the Stars are going to get Mikko Rantanen full year. And, Rantanen had to move twice last year within a span of like a month. And there's a human element to that. So, Rantanen, he's fully involved now with the Finnish mafia we have here in Dallas. He's well acquainted, got a full offseason. I think that's going to really help out too. And I talked about some of the departures of scoring. Well, Rantanen should, in theory, help out with that, right? Like, this is a superstar, or at least a top 12 forward in the league. I think the Stars are going to be in good hands, and it's going to be really, really intriguing to see what Golitzin kind of musters up, because you mentioned during his first go around, he was too stubborn with his line combinations. He really didn't want to change anything. And so he's going to have his hands all over this, and the Stars have a lot of good talent. It's about making it work now.
In regards to Mikko Rantanen, and you talked about this, like, he is going to be entering his first full season in Dallas, first full season with the new 8-year contract extension. Now, the question I do want to pose is, first full year in Dallas, first full year under a new head coach in Glenn Gulleton. What is your expectations in terms of offensive production from Mikko Rantanen, and do you think he will thrive underneath this new system under Glenn Gulleton?
Yeah, well, there's a couple caveats to this, just because it's going to look different from Pete DeBoer, obviously, and part of that was under DeBoer, like, the Stars are really deep, so they kind of took on this mantra of a little less for a lot more. Each guy wasn't playing a ton, right? There was some players that, if maybe they played on other teams, would be playing upwards of 22 minutes a night, but really they're playing 18 on Dallas just to kind of roll 4 lines. So I'm really, really fascinated to see how many minutes Rantanen's going to get a night. In Colorado, I think it was about 22 was kind of his average, kind of where he lived. I kind of suspect he's going to kind of live in that area as well here in Dallas. I think there's going to be a bit more leniency on just kind of letting your big dogs eat a bit. And I think Rantanen's going to get a lot of opportunities offensively to produce, and he's going to be surrounded with good players too on the power play and whatever line combination the Stars muster up. So I think there could be a potential for Rantanen to hover around the century mark. I don't know if he's going to get over that. Just because, playing alongside some others like, McKinnon and stuff, that doesn't hurt, of course. And maybe the Stars offense isn't going to have as much firepower as they've had in years past. So maybe there's not the opportunity to get like 120 points or, somewhere 115. But I think he can kind of hover around, the century mark. I would think there's going to be a good opportunity, and more than likely he's going to be pretty much kind of the leader in the clubhouse offensively for Dallas. which is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm just really, really excited to get a full year of Rantanen and what he can muster up offensively, just because he's had so much success in other areas. And I think he proved it in his short stint with Dallas. Like he doesn't have to, have a McKinnon to be successful. Like obviously that helps, but he can carry the load himself. I mean, he single-handedly took out the team that got rid of him last year in one period. Like he has that ability, but more importantly, like he is phenomenal in the playoffs. He's well over a point per game, and that's why Dallas went out and got him. And now it's time to bring those fruits of labor to the regular season and get a full year with a pretty good roster and see where he can end up at the end of the year.
Joey, final question from me. Jason Robertson.
Yeah.
He is going into the final year of his contract. Thomas Harley is going into the final year of his contract. Now, they're both RFAs, not UFAs at the end of this, but the Stars are already spending up pretty much to the cap. Robertson's going to want more money. Harley's going to want more money. That's why we're hearing the rumors, right, about Jason Robertson possibly being traded. How likely do you think that happens? And if it does happen, would it happen before the season or during the season?
My prediction is he's going to play the year. I really don't foresee him being traded. And if you're Dallas, I don't think you don't make a move like that in a lot of ways. I know it's juicy and it would be good for some content for sure. But if you're Dallas, this is a guy that, I mean, his ceiling is like 110 points, 40 goals, and really his floor over the last couple of like 80 points. And those are 2 years where he's had injuries. Like he hasn't been perfectly fully healthy in some of those years. So you just don't give up on, I mean, he's a top 5 left winger in the NHL. That's safe to say. He's one of the best just pure goal scorers in the NHL. And you need guys like that. So I think he plays the full year under contract, but it does get dicey because you're going to have to maybe make a decision on either Harley or Robertson. And that's why I brought up this point a few times on my own show. I'm curious, when the Stars went out and made this decision to acquire Mikko Rantanen, which I think a lot of us thought here in Dallas especially, like there's no way this could happen. There's no way they could take on that sort of contract. Maybe they made the decision like, well, this is going to be our guy now building around. We're going to build around Rantanen and not Robertson. Whereas a couple of years ago, like this would have been Jason Robertson team, right? He's going to be the future of the Dallas Stars. He's this franchise player. And maybe they made a decision like, hey, we're going to decide to build around Rantanen. Although they would love to have Jason Robertson. He's a fantastic player. But now they're going to have to make a really, really tough decision. If I'm Dallas and you had to sign one of the two, I'm definitely keeping Thomas Harley. It's so hard to find great quality defensemen. And now the Stars, it looks like, have two like top 15 guys with what Harley did this last season. Like he really burst out onto the scene. They could potentially have 2 number ones. That's just hard to find. And the Stars have done a great job of drafting and developing, but I think he plays the whole year. And if he has a huge year, then boom, like this is kind of a prove it year. He signed kind of the team friendly deal a couple of years ago. He has a chance to prove himself. We've seen guys in the past in those contract years, they go guns a-blazing like Sam Reinhart a few years ago. So I would expect him to have a fantastic year coming in. And then the Stars are going to be like, oh, crap. Yeah, maybe he does deserve. I mean, even without that, he probably deserves to be somewhere in the $11 million range. But maybe the Stars just can't give that to him now with what they've done with Mikko Rantanen.
Shu, one more for you.
I'm all set.
All right. Then that will do it for this look at the Dallas Stars, who will open up the season October 9th in Winnipeg, taking on the Jets again. That'll be a nice, juicy opener. That is Joey Erickson. He is the local expert of the Dallas Stars. And if you are a Stars fan, you need to subscribe to Locked On Dallas Stars for all the best news during the offseason, get you ready for next season, and of course, during the season as well. Joey, thank you for doing this. Great information. We appreciate it. And good luck to the Dallas Stars next year. Yeah,
appreciate you guys. It was a pleasure talking with you. And good luck the rest of the way with the rest of the previews. And look forward to seeing you guys in the future.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you, Joey.
Very much. Appreciate it. That'll do it for this offseason look at the Dallas Stars. We will be doing more of these along with our partners, Cam Stewart and Tyra Feldman, continuing this offseason right up to the start of next season. So if you missed any of our other previews of other teams, you can always check them out on the podcast or on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Shukri Wrights. Thank you for listening and watching Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.